Hey, welcome back. It's your boy Will J. Let's get into some deck brewing shenanigans. It's our third video of our Dominaria United Precon challenge, and if you're just joining us, we are building 4 new alternate precons, secret precons if you will, on top of the official releases. Sorry this is coming out a bit later than I had originally planned. I've been battling some health problems which made work pile up, and so I had to take care of certain obligations first and all this, but anyway, we've already covered Ivy Gleeful Spell Thief and Maria Scholar of Antiquity. And these precons are designed with specs just like the official precons we're used to getting every set. This means we're trying to use some new cards from DMU, we have certain deck building guideline restrictions, and we are definitely leaving room for upgrades. But quote unquote out of the box, these 4 decks should make for a good play experience when facing off against each other. And just like our previous video, I'm gonna tear the fabric of reality here for a second and really pretend that these are gonna be released. So again, I hope you could humor me on this. Our third precon features the legendary zombie wizard Ratadrabik of Urborg and his deck, Fallen Heroes. It looks to play out a bunch of Magic's iconic black and white legendaries and claim victory whether in life or undeath. So let's open the box and check out what we're getting. First, let's talk about our commander. Ratadrabik is a 4-mana value 3/3 zombie wizard with Vigilance and Ward 2, and he grants other zombies we control Vigilance, which makes him a zombie lord? Kinda. But more interestingly, whenever another legendary creature we control dies, we create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's not legendary, and it's a 2/2 black zombie in addition to its other colors and types. Legendary creatures can impact the game in big ways, and while you can usually only have 1 copy of them in play at a time, Ratadrabik essentially lets us multiply their effects by giving us non-legendary zombie versions of them when they die, provided we can raise them from the grave. Fallen Heroes doesn't have an aggressive playstyle, but it doesn't mean it isn't powerful in its own right. We'll unpack our usual themes of ramp, removal, and draw, but then I'll go over the other themes the precon provides us, namely Drain, Control, Reanimate, and something we like to call UP, or Utilities, Bombs, and Pets. Black and white aren't colors known for ramp, so Fallen Heroes leans heavily into artifact ramp to get things going. You'll find the usual Soul Ring and Arcane Signet, staples in every precon, but it also features some nice 2-drop rocks, namely Orzhov Signet, Mind Stone, and Talisman of Hierarchy. 2-drop rocks are nice because they let you play Ratadrabik as early as turn 3. However, there are higher mana value rocks in the deck. Commander Sphere seems to be thrown in pretty much every precon these days, and it's just okay. But Relic of Legends is a new mana rock from Dominaria United, which turns every legendary creature we control into a mana rock itself, or a mana dork rather. Perfect for this Legends-themed set. Thran Dynamo is a 4-drop, but it's got a great rate at coming in untapped and producing 3 mana, which helps us keep up considering the generally higher curve of this deck. Outside of rocks, we're also given Forsworn Paladin, which is a 1-drop that produces treasure, and Soldevi Adnate, an old card that is both a sacrifice outlet and a burst ritual effect. Lastly, there's Black Market, which I've always found a little expensive to play at 5 mana value, but over the course of a long game, it really does generate a lot of mana for you. The removal suite is packed in Fallen Heroes, and while Black and White doesn't have much means of fighting on the stack, nothing on the board is safe against you. Benelish Sleeper is a new card from DMU, which makes every player sacrifice a creature if it's kicked. Flashback Marauder and Plaguecrafter are classics that also have a similar effect, and while they are normally the ones sacrificing themselves to their ability, these can be even used as a pseudo-sacrifice outlet if you need to kill one of your own legendary creatures. Visara the Dreadful is a 6-mana value 5/5 flyer, which you can tap to destroy any creature, and with Ratadrabik out, lets you create multiple copies of Visara. Mangara of Corridor lets you exile any target permanent, and what's really neat about Mangara is that the cost of activating his ability is only the tapping. The exiling him is part of the ability that gets put on the stack. This means you can technically tap him, put that ability on the stack, and in response, if you have an instant-speed sack outlet, send Mangara to the graveyard before he exiles himself. Feed the Swarm is a staple for black that lets you get rid of any creature or enchantment, while Rite of Oblivion lets you exile any non-land permanent while also being a sack outlet itself, and later it can be flashback. These are both sorcery speed though, so that's just something to keep in mind. Generous Gift also lets you destroy any permanent, and giving a 3/3 green elephant is usually worth it. Dusk is a board wipe that won't kill any zombie copies that Ratadrabik has already made, and Austere Command is a modular board wipe that can also save tokens if you really want to. Lastly, Nev's Disc is a curious choice for a board wipe, but Ratadrabik is of Urborg, so I guess this is a slam dunk for flavor, as Nev Mineral is also a legend that hails from Urborg. While draw is an important aspect of any deck, I like how Fallen Heroes also uses it in other ways to further its own game plan. Village Rites is a 1-drop sack outlet that lets us draw 2 cards at instant speed. Altar's Reap is a 2-drop version of this. Reckoner's Bargain came out in Kamigawa and also gains us life on top of the 2 cards. Talk about power creep, right? And Deadly Dispute is a 2-drop that also creates a treasure token. This is one of my favorite cards and I'm glad this is in the deck. Moving to 3 drops, Fellstinger is a 3-drop 3/2 Death Touch that lets us sacrifice a creature to draw 2. And Shadow Prophecy is a new instant from DMU that is in this build, and it lets us draw 2 because, we're only running 2 types of basics. And your Temple is Under Attack has the flexibility of granting indestructible to our team, but also draws us 2 at instant speed. A couple of legendaries that help us draw cards are Shadowheart Dark Justiciar and Wernog Rider's Chaplain. Shadowheart is a sacrifice outlet that needs to tap to be able to draw cards based on the sack creature's power, which we can do multiple times if we have multiple copies of him. And Wernog gives us at least 1 clue when it both enters and leaves the battlefield, which is a really solid value for a 2-drop, especially if we're getting multiple copies of it. Fallen Heroes is not an aggro deck. Instead, it wants to drain our opponent's life total slowly but surely. It's the slow knife that kills. Ella's Ilkor is a new legendary creature, and this Phyrexian Core Cleric gives us incidental life gain, but more importantly, drains our opponents whenever a creature of ours dies. Stack up multiple copies of her, and you can see how this begins to hurt real fast. Ayara First of Locthwain drains our opponents whenever she or a black creature enters the battlefield under our control, meaning the zombies we make will trigger her. And again, with multiple copies out, the damage adds up quickly. Sir Conrad the Grim is also a drain engine, and he cares about creatures dying or a creature being put in the graveyard from anywhere, or if a creature of ours leaves our graveyard, like if we reanimate it or something, and so it's just a heavy hitter and a finisher in many decks, this one included. That said, outside of those drain engines, we have some conditional ones. Kambal is a 3-drop that can make it hurt for our opponents to cast non-creature spells, while Lisa Shrouded Dusk makes it hurt for anyone if they want to cast any spell. Imagine 2 copies of Lisa on the battlefield, and now every spell is gonna cost 4 life. That definitely puts a clock on the game. Sarivok Deathbringer is a conditional drain effect, but with our deck geared towards sacrificing, we hopefully won't get hurt too bad by our own ability. Astarion the Decadent is a bit expensive at 6 mana value, but his feed mode at our end step can double the life loss of an opponent of ours. And I don't have to tell you that multiple copies of Astarion can be just game ending now for someone. Finally, Warlock class. It's a nice card with incremental drain at level 1, but at level 3 can also double up the life loss of our opponents on our end step. Draining everyone is prone to drawing hate, and so Fallen Heroes gives us means to exert some control over the game on top of the removal it plays. Ghostly Prison keeps our face safe by taxing our opponents if they want to attack us, and Nil's Discipline Enforcer is a legendary creature with a similar effect in that it gives counters in exchange for taxing attacks headed our way. Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, taxes everyone's non-creature spells, which can slow the game down for us, and Redain God of the Worthy taxes our opponent's big non-creature spells that cost 4 or more. Eidolon of Rhetoric is also a way to slow the game down, which will hopefully give us enough time to set up because each player will only be able to cast 1 spell each turn. And if you want to get rid of it, well, we have plenty of sack outlets to release the cap if we need to. Ascendant Evankar buffs our zombies, and other black creatures as well, while also shrinking non-black creatures. And since the Evankar is legendary, this is an effect that can stack and make it extremely difficult for non-black decks to survive. Another 6-drop with the big effect is Martyr's Bond. It's a 6 mana value enchantment that reads, whenever a non-land permanent we control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, each opponent must sacrifice a permanent that shares a card type with it. So whether that's going to be creatures or artifacts or what have you, you're forcing sacrifices among your opponents as well. While getting zombies back from sacrificing legendary creatures makes the deck resilient, it's through reanimating them that we get to multiply their effects. Mara is a new legendary card, also from Urborg, and when she deals combat damage to a player, we get to return to play a creature of ours that died that turn. Activated Sleeper has a similar effect, although instead of reanimating, he becomes a copy of any creature that died that turn. Victimize is an ever cost-efficient reanimation spell in that it returns 2 creatures while also being a sacrifice outlet to boot. Lisa Forgotten Archangel is a powerhouse in this deck. Not only does she lock out graveyards for her opponent's creatures, on the end step of every turn, she brings back any of our creatures that died that turn back to our hand. Gisa Glorious Resurrector also locks out graveyards, but she's like a reverse Lisa. She brings opponent's creatures back to our side of the battlefield. And note that she literally brings those creatures back. Not token versions of them or anything like that, the original versions of them. This means that if any legendary creature of our opponents die, probably other than their commander, we can create a zombie token copy of them when they eventually die from our side of the battlefield. Sun Titan is also a staple and just provides terrific value in bringing any permanent from our graveyard back, provided it has a mana value of 3 or less. Fallen Heroes also gives us a copy of Shieldred. No, not the new one from Dominaria United, classic Shieldred. And this is the money card of this precon. She forces our opponents to sacrifice a creature on their upkeep, but also reanimates a creature of ours during our upkeep. If we got multiple copies of Shieldred, that means we'd be doubling the sacrifice and doubling the reanimation effect as well. Lastly, we have Braids. No, not the new legendary version of Braids, but the Saga version, the Frightful Return. It's a sack outlet, yeah, it's great, brings a creature back to our hand, and even has a mini Braids effect on the 3rd chapter. Just solid overall value for a 3-drop. For EBP, we get a good mix. Fallen Heroes gives us a classic staple to protect our commander in Swiftfoot Boots. We're also given Rootborn defenses, which not only gives our creatures indestructible, but also lets us populate, essentially creating another copy of a legendary creature if we have a zombie version of theirs out. Speaking of copies, Strionic Resonator lets us double up on triggers. Teysa Karlov also lets us double up on death triggers, essentially letting Ratadrabik make 2 zombie tokens instead of just 1. And Kaya Geist Hunter is the planeswalker of this precon, and her -2 ability lets us double the amount of tokens we create in a turn. Yahenni is a solid sack outlet which gives itself indestructible, and if we're destroying our opponent's boards a lot, it can be a big backup threat. And Aaron Benalia's Ruin is also a sack outlet which, if we have a big board, can also switch our game plan up into a go-wide type of beatdown if needed. Let's check out how Fallen Heroes stacks against our playability matrix. If you're curious to hear more about this, I go more in depth on it in our Rethinking Power Levels video, which you can find in the channel. So for offense, there are efficient draw spells in the deck, but they're usually conditional, meaning you need to play creatures first. Plus, they're usually burst draw effects as opposed to consistent sources of card advantage. There are a decent number of redundancies, but I think upgrading the precon with some tutors will better ensure that you can get your game-winning pieces when you need them instead of just hoping to draw into them, you know? So all of these factors, for me, hurt the deck's consistency. For efficiency, there are a decent amount of mana rocks for sure, but the curve of the spells you need to make a game-ending state is on the high end. Plus, you will need some time to set up to make a threatening board state, and this is why I'm also giving it a low efficiency score. The quality of its win con, though, is pretty decent. Yeah, it'll likely take multiple turns to take people out, but you are potentially killing multiple people at once, and possibly even the whole table at once. Overall, this precon's offense is something I'd rate a D. Defense, though, is where the precon shines. There are a lot of interaction pieces in the deck that'll make it difficult for your opponents to get their game plan going or to kill you, which is good, because this deck does take some time to set up, so it's pretty consistent in that sense. Some of the sorcery speed interaction does kill a bit of the efficiency for me, as well as not having the absolutely best costed spells in the format, but those are a bit pricey, and really this is the only hole I see in the defense of this precon. The coverage is absolutely terrific, as the deck can interact with whatever permanent is on the board, it locks out graveyards, and it even taxes on mana value, which is an alternate way of interacting with the stack outside of blue. Plus, these effects are tacked onto both one-time spells and permanents, meaning it can really put up a defensive wall that'll be hard to crack once it gets going. Overall, I'd grade this precon's defense at a B. Putting it all together, Fallen Heroes is a good precon deck to pilot in mid-power casual pods. And that's it for this episode. That's 3 down and 1 to go. The Fallen Heroes decklist should be available in the description down below, and if you found this interesting, be sure to tap that like button and make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. We'll be unveiling the last of our Dominaria United secret precon decks, and afterwards, if we're lucky, I'm trying to sort out the logistics to be able to record a game so that you guys can see these 4 decks in action against each other. No promises just yet, but it is something that I am hoping that I can do. And with that, stay inspired, friends, and I'll see you next time.